I swear on my mother's grave. Would I lie to you? You can take that to the bank. A very common feature of our society today, probably just not in our country, but in most countries, is that people have an integrity problem. They may very well lie to you. Yesterday, we pulled up to Sam's to get gasoline, and we were behind a car that was fueling. This fella came by and he went to an empty spot and he said, "Motioned us to come over there." I was a bit apprehensive. Do I really want to back out of this sure space I've got to go over there? I even said, I wonder if he's a panhandler. Well, it turned out he had a name tag on. He wasn't. But he was, with good intention, saying, "Come on over here, you won't have to wait." But there are so many people who mislead that we need to be suspicious at times. For instance, on your email, if you have email. If someone says your account is frozen and you don't even have an account with that bank, be very suspicious. And sometimes it is something, well, okay, is this something that could be real? Usually you can determine pretty quickly, okay, this is junk. Somebody is just trying to get my information. There is a problem in our world with people telling the truth. It's not a new problem. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37, has some words to say about honesty. "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.' But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." John Stott said of our text today, if the rabbis tended to be permissive in their attitude toward divorce, they were permissive also in their teaching about oaths. It is another example of their devious treatment of Old Testament scripture in order to make it more amenable to obedience. Jesus first uses his formula, what had been heard. The teaching to which Jesus referred was not an exact quotation of one text from the Old Testament, but a summary of several Old Testament texts. Notice Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. "If a man vows a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth." Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 21 through 23. "If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth." The instructions of fulfilling a vow were closely related to the third of the 10 Commandments. Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." And Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12. "You shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." There is perhaps also a connection to the 9th commandment. Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. D.A. Carson observes the Mosaic law forbade irreverent oaths, light use of the Lord's name, and broken vows. While oath and vow had specific meanings, they were often used interchangeably. And so Jesus stated what you had heard about the making of oaths. And then we see what Jesus said. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all. The Jewish teachers had developed an elaborate system of which vows were binding and which ones were not. Jesus offered a scathing rebuke of this practice in Matthew chapter 23, verses 16 through 22. He says, "Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold of the temple that is made, or the gold of the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it, and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it." A key distinction made regarding vows was whether or not God's name was invoked. Jewish rabbis taught that if God's name was used, a vow was binding. But if his name was not used, the vow was not binding. As a result, they did not hesitate to swear by heaven, by the earth, by the city of Jerusalem, and even by their heads, that is, by their lives. They said that one was not obligated to keep that kind of vow. It's somewhat like our childhood practice of saying something with our fingers crossed behind our back. Jesus said none of the things they swore by could be separated from God. Nothing in life can be separated from God, including the tiny hairs on our head. Rather than trying to decide which oaths were binding and which were not, Jesus said, do not swear at all. Your yes should mean yes, and your no should mean no. An oath should not be necessary. James, the half-brother of Jesus, wrote in his letter, "But above all, my brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." James chapter 5, verse 12. The source of frivolous oaths is evil, either the evil one Satan or evil things such as the heart. The only reason frivolous oaths are necessary is that we live in an evil world where falsehood is common. Now, Jesus' teaching does not forbid all oaths. In a court of law, if one is called to testify, they take an oath. In our nation, out of concern that someone might violate their conscience, one can say, I don't swear, but I affirm. I think that's really pretty much the same thing. We need to recognize that some oaths are legitimate. God swore with an oath himself. Hebrews chapter 6, verses 13 and 14. And so, after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And then in Hebrews chapter 7, verses 20 and 21, and it was not without an oath, for those who formerly became priests were made such without an oath. But this one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Jesus himself, in a sense, made an oath. Matthew chapter 26, verses 63 and 64. Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And we read that Jesus remained silent. And actually, this is before the Jewish leaders. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest had said, I adjure you, I urge you by the living God. Basically, are you swearing, making an oath before God of what you've said? The Apostle Paul himself says in Philippians chapter 1, verse 8, For God is my witness, how I yearn for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. Again, God is my witness. There are solemn occasions when making a vow or taking an oath are appropriate. What Jesus emphasized in his teaching was that honest men and women do not need to resort to oaths. It was not that they should refuse to take an oath if required by some external authority to do so. Jesus was teaching that we should avoid frivolous oaths. They are not only wrong, but useless. Someone said, an honest man is believed without an oath, but a dishonest man is not believed though he use 1,000. Now we must avoid a blasphemous use of God's name. Oh my God is a phrase that is used so lightly by so many people. That is inappropriate. OMG is but an abbreviation for that phrase. A person may say, what in God's name are you doing? Again, that is using the name of God lightly. We must take care not to use God or Jesus in a profane way. And I'll go to meddling here a bit. Gosh is but a byword for God, and geez, a byword for Jesus. Jesus was teaching that we should be truthful. Here's the bottom line. You don't need to swear an oath on everything you say, because you should be telling the truth. When you say yes, it should mean yes. When you say no, it should mean no. We should be known for telling the truth. Oaths should be unnecessary. A young boy was explaining to his baby brother how to interpret his parents' responses. He said, if they say yes, that means maybe. If they say, I'll think about it, that means no. If they say no, that means you will have to pester them twice as long to get what you want. Well, I hope the boy's evaluation was wrong. But if it was accurate, his parents had not learned a key lesson of our text. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Paul writes to the Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 25, Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. This admonition was actually made to Christians. Don't lie anymore. Speak the truth. It is an admonition that is still needed. And Jesus was teaching that we should always keep our word. We should not make promises that we don't intend to keep. Wedding vows are frequently broken in our day. A man and a woman will take their wedding vows before God and witnesses. And at times they're already thinking, well, if I get tired of this, I'll end it. Do we take what we say seriously? Do we keep our word? Larry Calvin gave this illustration. He said, when I was about 7 years old, my granddad had a Model T he was selling. A man came by one morning and told my granddad he would give him $1,000 for that old car. My granddad shook the man's hand on it. The man couldn't take it right then. He said, "I'll be back a little later today to get it if that is okay." Granddad said, "Sure, that will be fine." Later that afternoon, another man offered my granddad $2,500 for the car. Calvin says, I will never forget. My granddad broke into a belly laugh and said to the man, "I wish you'd come by this morning. I could sure use that $2,500. But I shook hands on a deal with a guy this morning. I sold that thing for $1,000. He kept his word. His yes was yes. He kept his promise. Now, sometimes we are unable to keep our promises. We may become ill. Our situation may change. In those cases, we need to explain to the person, I can't do what I said I was going to do, and I'm sorry that I can't do that. I suppose a good rule in life is to make few promises and keep those we make. John Stott said, Christians should say what they mean and mean what they say. Our unadorned words should be enough, yes or no. And when a monosyllable will do, why waste our breath by adding to it? A.M. Burton said, oaths arise because men are so often liars. In effect, Jesus raises every spoken word to the level of an oath. Randy Harris, commenting on this text, says, when Jesus comes along and says, I want you to have an integrity that runs so deep that when you say yes, it always means yes, and when you say no, it always means no. That is teaching that would revolutionize the world. It has been said, and correctly so, we have an integrity crisis in our culture. As Christians, we should not be of the world. As Christians, we should be careful in our use of speech. When it comes to our mouth, we should open carefully.